Well, hello. Coming at you again. It's Yakov here with another paranormal interview. I've got my friend Mattie on the call.
Hey, me, Mattie.
So, I've been doing some Bigfoot content lately, which I've always been doing Bigfoot content. It's probably my favorite content in the world. Um, Recently, I did a video talking about someone's experience with Bigfoot, and Mattie over here dropped some interesting comments in the old comment section. I'm gonna read that real quick. This is from Mattie. Something I've noticed. A lot of time, these things happen. A lot of the time these things happen, the person experiencing the phenomenon is usually alone and unobserved by outside actors. If you're familiar with Schrodinger's box, I think that in some instances, people can become the cat in the box, so to speak. So that was very astute to me. There's a
Yeah.
lot of takes on Bigfoot. You could go fucking a million different directions, and I always feel good when I find a new one. And the quantum Bigfoot, I think, is perfect. It's perfect. My response to that,
Quantum.
it'll sell, man. It is a marketable term. So my response is, I could see that. Like your preoccupation and focus on the idea that something could be out there manifests it. Not even like you believe in Bigfoot, so you see Bigfoot. More that you know all the potentials. There could be people with bad intentions in the woods, dangerous animals, general thoughts of the paranormal, and they could all amalgamize into a terrifying experience that applies specifically to you as the observer and no one else. If there had been someone else there, that interaction could have broken that focus on the frightening potentials or added enough variables to the situation being observed that no absurd potentials could have been decided on, therefore never manifest. So the idea basically is that when you're alone out in the unknown, your mind is
Mm-hmm.
going, even if you don't realize it, like subconsciously you're thinking of all the potentials that could be there, whether it's a lot of times it's the fun you're going to have, the good things you're going to do, but sometimes, especially out in the woods alone, everything starts looking the same. It's getting a little dark out, maybe a little chilly. You're thinking of all the things that could go wrong sometimes. And I think that's the sort of thoughts that can manifest things. They can bring them about. They can take the potentials from the chaos and bring them into order right before your eyes. So, I think what was the deal with Schrodinger's box? Do you want to explain that real quick? Maybe tie
Well,
it in.
Schrodinger's box. I'm not an expert on this at all, but generally the idea is that you got a cat in a box, right? And there's some kind of like nuclear activator or whatever in it. You don't know if the cat is alive or dead or not until you open the box, right?
Yeah.
So like every given like second that passes by it, the box is unopened, unleashes like a possible new reality where either the cat is alive or dead, and that's the basis of from what I understand. I'm sure there's probably some like
I think,
really educated person in the comments that'll probably like further elaborate on that.
well, this is a fucking woo-woo show. This is not fucking science hour. I don't fucking love
Yeah,
science. Uh,
yeah,
the implication, I think, is that it is the observer who manifests the effect, whether one way or the
yeah,
other. And it reminds me of an experiment that was done with rays of light to figure out if they were particle
yeah.
or
The
wave.
Israeli study. I've read about that.
So yeah, it would be depending on who was observing it, whether it would take the form of particle or wave. So it seemed like it was neither, and it was dependent on an observer. So it wasn't wave or particle or anything until it was observed, I think is the implication. So
Yeah, it's kind of like how it like the waves or whatever because they weren't observed. They weren't like loaded into like God's dream or whatever yet until it was actively accessed.
So the idea is with Bigfoot, it's the same sort of thing that you could manifest something that's totally insane, an ape man in the woods, just because you had these sorts of ideas, the dangerous humanoids, of the animals, of the paranormal, and because you're so focused on that, whether consciously or unconsciously, that can show itself to you. So the idea is that if you weren't the only person there, if somebody else was there with you, there, first of all, your conscious thoughts are kind of interacting with them on different levels. They're expecting different things. They change your mood, you change their mood. I think it makes it much harder to find consensus on something that would be so ridiculous. So I think you could see Bigfoot, and it is not necessarily, it wouldn't be real to someone else, but it is very real to you. You are seeing it. You did have the experience, and I don't think it's
Absolutely.
illusory. I think that's the way these crazy things manifest in reality. That's why people have such crazy experiences that are so unbelievable to me or anyone else, because we weren't in that mindset. We didn't have the emotions there. We didn't believe this perfect storm of beliefs that created what occurred. So that might be why these things are always seen alone. And you go back and you have to explain this shit to your family and friends, and you sound like an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for stuff to happen with more people, you'd have to have more like-minded people to keep that a consensual reality matrix in that area. And when you're alone, it's a lot easier to accomplish that reality matrix.
I think our reality is a matter of consensus. That's why it's so easy to manipulate reality when you control the media. Because you can make people believe whatever you want, and they will follow the fuck along, and suddenly that shit that you were trying to portray that was only real to you is real on the grandest stage of them all to everybody.
Absolutely.
I think you were last night you had quoted the Kabbalion, and there was this quote about half-truths. I think that's exactly that there are only half-truths, I think, is the idea. That's what comes to mind here.
I got it written down right here. It's the fourth principle, the principle of polarity, and this is from the Kabbalion, and it says, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same, opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. It give like a little visual of what this means. I have this piece of old jewelry here. So you got these two snakes. Note how they're facing each other up front, but on the bottom, they're connected at the tail.
Yes, and throughout the Kabbalion, the main message is that everything is one, that you are part of the eternal, that there is no distinction between, say, hot or cold, but they are two polarities on one thing. Mm-hmm. And that's how all things are.
Vibration.
Yeah, yes. So, yeah, then when you start to think about all of this paranormal stuff, you can see how they manifest from an infinite potential. That's what God is to me, ultimately. It is the unmanifested potentials that creates all things that everything emanates from. So it's not unbelievable that you could see ghosts. There could be poltergeists. There could be this or that. And it doesn't necessarily... I don't know how I feel about ghosts. I don't know how I feel about any of these things, but I do feel like weird things go bump in the night with people in the right mindset. You hear a lot of the times like negativity can cause you to see shadow people, or your psychic energy is what causes your cabinet to slam out of nowhere. I think all of that could be taken to its absolute most extreme. Its absolute most extreme might be being killed by Bigfoot in the middle of the fucking woods and getting face fucked by it.
Yeah. That can happen, man.
I wonder if that's what happened to Peter Kane when the Bigfoot sucked his ween.
Oh, it's probably real.
And I'll be honest, this is kind of what's on my mind when I'm in the woods these days. Like, am I gonna get laid out here by a Bigfoot Wendigo creature? Hopefully.
Listen, man, if it happens, I hope it's a she-foot and not a he-foot, okay? So at least it ain't gay.
Got a bunch of hybrid babies running around in the woods.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah. Then it kind of rectifies, like you were saying, from that quote, like, all paradoxes can be rectified. And that's kind of how it is. Like, whether Bigfoot is coming through portals, whether it's an animal, whether it's this or that, and we're just using Bigfoot as an example here, but all of the above could be true, and all of it could be, untrue at the same time. But the point is that I do think the experiences are absolutely real, and I would like to. There are definitely cases out there where multiple people have seen this phenomenon at the same time. Now, I wonder, like what sort of consensus would that take among a crowd of people? Like, does everybody have to be afraid, or is this all just nonsense and it really is a physical thing? I have a hard time with
Well,
physical Bigfoot, to be honest.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
really buy that. I don't buy that it is an undiscovered primate. It doesn't work for me at all. And everybody who tries to sell that leaves out all the details, all the paranormal details about Bigfoot. Like, you can go check out
Hmm.
the Ape Canyon account. You'll find information about the Ape Canyon account everywhere. But what you won't find is that the man who went out and he found these creatures, he was told to go there by a lake spirit, like a woman of the lake. So
Hmm.
these are the sort of people that have these experiences most often, and these really famous accounts, they're all like that. Even like the Patterson Gimlin footage. Patterson, he drew his encounter with Patty prior to it occurring. Is that because he's a fraud, or was he in touch with something else that was drawing him to have that experience? And that's hard to say.
I mean, I think everyone has had some kind of experience of something like that. I mean, they're all alone. They just witness strange things. There's been times where I've been out in the woods in Georgia. I'm completely alone, and I've heard something try and call my name. They're saying, hey, Mattie," and I'd look around. There ain't nothing there, man. Nothing there. It spooked the
Classic,
hell out of me.
classic Skinwalker, no doubt about it. This sort of thinking might also explain why children are so much more inclined to seeing paranormal things. But because they will entertain any possibility. That's the beauty of being a child, for better or worse.
Yeah, they're innocent.
Yeah, they're absolutely willing to see orbs. They're absolutely willing to have poltergeist experiences, to see unknown creatures. When I was a child, I was always my earliest memories basically are like looking at books about cryptids. And I convinced myself many times that I saw cryptids as a child. I know, looking back, it was like nonsense. But the point is, like, I was actively trying to manifest it all my goddamn life. And frankly, I don't know if that counts against this whole theory, because I've had very, very few experiences that I can think of that were legit. I brought up orbs as a child. Like, that's something I've actually experienced. That's probably some of the weirdest stuff. I never got to experience some of these other things, being called from the tree line in the woods, some shit like that.
Hmm.
How do you feel about that? Was that something you would want to experience again, or?
Well, see, the thing is, I'd like to experience that again, but I'd like to have somebody else there to like verify. Because I mean, obviously, the more people you have, the more cred it would have. But I mean, it'd be such a foolish thing. You'd have to establish like a consensual reality matrix with that other person to have that manifest. And there's been a lot of times where they'll bring other people along and say, this is where it happened, and nothing happens, and they just make a fool of themselves every time.
I would wonder how technology reacts to this sort of thing. How quick can you pull your phone out and record something that you've
Yeah,
manifested, like, into your reality from the infinite abyss that is your mind? I would wonder, maybe that's why so many of you get so many images of these things that are just not convincing. And maybe the images themselves are the half truths. You get half the information there. You get just enough that anybody else who didn't experience it can now deny it.
yeah. I find that like with a lot of like paranormal footage, like even like the films or the pictures, they kind of glitch out sometimes when they try to catch this stuff, and it just ends up being not really provable all the way.
That's why people have made jokes like maybe Bigfoot is just blurry. But then there's actual theories about there. There's actual theories that Bigfoot can cloak. And to me, that was like, for a long time, that was like the most enticing possibility. But now you don't have to cloak if you were a mind form. You can just barely be real. But that belief is what pushes it over the edge. Even if the person seeing it just saw a blurry outline, like, to them, they fucking saw it, even though it couldn't even be captured on video or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know.
Mind form's a really interesting word because it brings me to thinking about the word fantasy in of itself, which is from like an old Greek or Roman word, fantation or whatever. It means to make real. to make seeable, which is the very meaning of that word. So you're probably when you're projecting stuff and manifesting it into like your reality or whatever, it's kind of like an eidolon, or however you pronounce that.
Yeah, it reminds me of Greek ideas of the daemon, the spirit who inspires you and gives you an idea. And I don't know how literally they took it. I would assume on differing levels, depending on who you talk to. But
Yeah,
it is that mind form. It's where the word demon comes from, which a lot of people would argue that these paranormal events are demons. But there's always been the knowledge of the mind form that's with you that
hmm
other people don't detect. But it really it creates a very real change in you, and that's what really
yeah.
matters.
I know for a fact that the ancients, because reading from like the Hermetica or whatever, the mind form itself is referred to as the good demon, and it's generally given the name of the pomander, which translated means something like the man shepherd or the heart. The what was the term? The cultivator of men. And so mind itself was like a deity, is deified. I think it was called nous in ancient Greek terms.
So is that simply consciousness?
I believe so. Like the mind and consciousness was a demon granted to man by the gods,
See, I
and it
I
itself was kind of its own god.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When I think of that, I start to think of the Gnostic ideas. To them, it was not the good God. That was the demiurge, I think. That is the creator. The people who are trapped in their attachment to the physical world, who just keep endlessly
Mm-hmm.
creating shit and shit and shit and prison and shit and death. It's fucking awful. But I think like that's what created this world is our intentions and our consensus, which are often terrible, and that's why a lot of these ancient religions, you're supposed to let go of this attachment. You're supposed to get away from the material and go back into the
mm-hmm.
infinity, where you only exist as a mathematical potential, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of talk in like Zen Buddhism or whatever to escape from like the wheel of karma or whatever by just not acting at all. Because if you keep adding to the karma, like either negative or positive, you just keep being reborn in a world of shit.
yes.
And I think the whole goal there is very Gnostic because you're trying to escape that wheel and reunite with the Godhead.
Yeah. The idea is to not identify yourself as the actor and to expect nothing from your actions. And once you do that, then you're no longer incurring karma. You're no longer pulling from the infinity and shitting it out onto the world recklessly. And that's the idea. A lot of people are worried about getting more good karma, but I think, and like we were saying with the Kabbalion, how it's two polar. They're polar opposites, but they're on the same
Yeah.
spectrum. They're on one
Mm-hmm.
thing. So good and evil
And
aren't
the pendulum
so.
keeps swinging back and forth.
They're not as opposed as people realize. Both are keeping you attached to the physical world. They're both keeping you coming back with things that you have to work out with other people. And that is, to me, that is like that is to go further away from God. That either way. So yeah, I do think people recklessly create their own situations, not even realizing they're doing it. And then they see it and they're totally confused by it, totally flabbergasted by it, and they can only accept that it exists outside them. When in the reality is that everything they've ever experienced came from them at some point. The question is how many lives have we lived? How sick have I been of this place for how many lives? Probably a lot.
You'd be suffering karma from thousands of years ago, probably, man.
I'm feeling it, man. It's all weighing very heavy on me. So, yeah, going back to infinite potentials, I absolutely think that implies that there are other realities basically on top of us. Uh, and
Yeah.
that gets back when we're getting into, I was talking about the daemon. Well, that goes back even further. To I think it goes back into like the jinn and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure a lot of those
Jin.
ideas in Greece came from the Middle East. And in the Middle East, there were always ideas of these parallel entities that live on top of our realm, but never really coincide with us. And I say never. There are absolutely accounts of them coinciding. You could go to the Fae, and it's kind of the same thing, where you have this race of I want to say people, but that's not quite right, of these etheric beings who can manifest, and we can manifest there, but they weren't really meant to mix.
Oh yeah, a lot of that stuff really does go back because you look at like some what have we dug up in this modern era of the Indo-European migrations. A lot of Western society, and I guess Eastern society too, all came from that center region where the Indo-Euros just migrated out all over the place, and I guess the language got kind of confuddled or whatever. You know, with that Babel event in the Bible. It's
Yeah.
kind of probably like a good metaphor for that.
Yeah, so I was actually doing an interview the other night with someone of Native American descent, and they were talking about how their elders would talk about how there are portals at the foot of the certain mountain, and that it allows for other
Yeah.
entities to come through. And to him, that was implying the little people, which would be, in my understanding, much like the Fae would be.
Fae.
Yeah, the exact same thing. So if there are these realms that are populated by other beings, could Bigfoot not be an animal of that realm? And then it's like, does it have to be? What I don't know. What can we draw through these portals? It starts to sound like summoning, like you would see in a lot of alchemy and hermetic
Grimoires.
stuff. They would always
Yeah.
you draw the
The
circle.
triangles of art. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
you
lot
draw.
of Salamanic ritual and stuff and all that, where they purposely meditate themselves within that triangle of art to focus their mind onto it to really manifest that spirit out of themselves into existence for them.
And they were very worried that it was real. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that fucking protective circle to make sure that the being that they were pulling through from that realm wasn't going to harm them. So there was always the knowledge that these things were real and they would fuck you up.
Oh yeah, Andrus. If you're familiar with that one, apparently Andrus will if you're tempted out of that circle, he'll kill you.
I don't know who that is.
Andrus, I'm not sure what number of demon or deva or whatever you want to call it, fallen angel, jinn. It's this entity that appears in the form of like a man astride a big black wolf, and he has like either the head of like a crow or an owl of some sort with like wings on him. And he holds a saber, and apparently when you invoke Andrus, you're supposed to use him to fill, like, especially like military commanders would summon Andrus to fill their men with like bloodthirst or whatever to like guarantee a victory in battle. But I mean, Andrus itself is supposed to be a very, very bloodthirsty spirit that will even kill the magician summoning him.
Now, when we're talking about like etheric realms that are on top of us, and I would wonder, get into string theory and into all the quantum stuff. It only seems like it only becomes more possible in my mind that these other realms could even be infinite. And we could be
They probably are infinite, man.
we could be gradually discovering them as someone thinks up a new idea, then they manifest that, and it can just lead to a whole new mythology. I think a lot of the great ideas throughout mankind, they might have been channeled from other sources, and that's what like Nikolai Tesla would have said, that he would have like a seizure, and then he would get this idea for this great invention from another place, from other beings.
I mean, I've done that before. There was a time where I was at like work or whatever, and I had this problem that I could not solve. I couldn't figure it out. And I had to sleep on it, and I had like the strangest dream where I saw this kind of creek bed, like a river, and it was, free flowing. And I saw one rock come up out the mouth of the river, and it didn't cut the flow off completely. And then I saw this other rock come to the other side and meet the other one, and it closed off completely. And I just woke up that morning. I'm like, I have the solution to my problem, and I just adjusted the machine. I did, basically as below, so above. So I just cranked the bottom half, the top half, and then actually it centered the tag just right so it could drill into the information. It was done.
Now,
So I think like the etheric realms and dreams and all that, they draw from something else, from somewhere else.
that brings me to like, how real are these places? And half truths, man. It makes me think of like Chris Chan talking about about his fucking OC dimension. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
man.
how
Yeah, Christian, that's some wild stuff.
how hard do you have to believe that the Sonic the Hedgehog fanfic you made is actually real? And how many people have to believe it before that becomes mythology? And if anybody is poised to become a mythological figure of the future, I would say it is Chris Chan.
Yeah.
He could be more powerful than any of us realize. And I'm not even joking.
Yeah, even the Hermetica and the Kabbalion talk about that, how the universe itself is a mental creation of God. So God kind of like dreamed of us, and then we dream of gods.
Yeah, we are God's OC, and then we create our own OCs, and then they become real in some extent.
Yeah.
If just in your mind, in your imagination, or like...
And it influences your actions. It becomes real.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chris Chan went into meditative states where he was actually interacting with Sonichu. That would not surprise me at all. And especially someone who's had so much reason to disassociate from their material reality.
Yeah.
But then again, you see someone like that and all the damage they're doing to their own body and everything, and you're like, well, maybe they're very attached to the material. Got to work that one out, Chris Chan.
Yeah, like even when I like do art or whatever, I don't like think of something specifically. I kind of just like meditate, and all of a sudden I just receive some kind of image or whatever, and I just do my best to, crayon it down or whatever I do.
I would like to think while you're dreaming of this other realm, they're dreaming of you. That's what I would like to think, and that they are the other side of the pole from where we are, and then in between, where we both came from, that's God, where everything emanates from.
Universe is a mental creation, man.
So, what we got to do is we've all got to start believing in Bigfoot. Stop being a fucking skeptic. Open your goddamn mind. Because I want to see this stuff. If you believe that they can clone dinosaurs, they're going to clone dinosaurs, and I can die a happy man. That's what I need from everybody watching this.
Mm-hmm. You gotta believe, man. You gotta get you that T-shirt with the UFO on it says "I want to believe." You just gotta believe it.
Yeah, all you gotta do is buy T-shirts. Teespring.com/stores/yakov-alive.
Buy T-shirts, man.
Buy a lot of T-shirts, and you can't go wrong. That won't get you attached to your material possessions or anything. No, you'll be very attached to my T-shirts. They're great T-shirts. So
aren't symbols themselves like material things that come from dreams and they become real?
Yeah, I mean, you can see it very tangibly in your real life. Like, that's what money is. The fucking money we use, it doesn't really have any intrinsic value at all.
It's fiat.
It only works because everybody agrees that it's money.
Everyone believes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, it's covered in magical sigils and this or that. You don't need any of that shit. You don't need that at all. People will believe. But I think you can look at other things of value, whether it's gold or Bitcoin or any of these things. And yeah, you can make the argument that they're intrinsically valuable. But I think that starts to fall flat. Like, ultimately, that's all about belief, too. It doesn't matter how much argument you can make. Ultimately, that argument is just trying to convince somebody else that shit is actually money.
I mean, if you like read into like the old Norse sagas or whatever, there was an age where gold itself wasn't valuable at all. It was freely given away until I think the giants, the Jotuns, they started like hoarding gold jealously, and that made everybody else like jealously hoard it too.
Well,
then it had like actual value.
That's largely the story of the Nephilim, is that the Anunnaki came and they created a slave race to go mine gold in Africa or whatever the hell, in the Absu, in the abyss. So, yeah, that's one thing, is that, like, this preoccupation with precious metals and all of that could have been given to us from another source, whether it was... Because I don't think any of that was aliens. I don't believe that. I don't think they were quite that material, whatever these things were. When you read the Book of Enoch or this or that.
Not extraterrestrial at all, but very terrestrial, just a different dimension, I guess.
Alien to us, surely. Yeah. But it just goes to show over time, I don't know. I think that we have brought about all of our entire structure of reality on ourselves, and any issues we have with it can only be blamed on yourself. What can you do except look in the mirror and do your fucking best to change it?
Oh yeah, and I think we're actually in a pretty unprecedented time too, because with like how the internet is, it's like having a whole new library of Alexandria. So like a lot of stuff that went lost is coming back, is being restored in a way. So I mean, we have like all of humanity's, thoughts and dreams and all that recorded down, and it's freely accessible.
I think a lot of that is heading towards what I would call another golden age. I do think what a
Yeah.
lot of these ancient religions said. And there was one quote in the Kabbalion: the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. So I do think, like,
Mm-hmm.
as bad as you think things are right now, it'll swing back and get better. And it would be foolish to expect that in your lifetime, I think. I think these are things, just the knowledge that is the way things flow, that should be enough for you. And frankly, like, it's not for me. It's not right now. I can't sit here and preach and say, like, I've given up my whole attachment to this whole thing, but I'm goddamn trying here. It should be just the very knowledge that it's occurring. That should make you feel better and start taking you home, brother. But I think what we're seeing is a trend towards decentralization that most notably began with the internet. And you can see it in all these little things, in email, in decentralized social media, in cryptocurrency. I think that is kind of a mirror to the way that God creates. I think we are all decentralized aspects of God. And I think of it as God is the ocean and we are the droplets of water. Now, where did the drops begin and the ocean start, and where do they end? And how do you differentiate? And I don't think you ultimately can. If you have the right perspective, you can't differentiate that shit anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think of like compass directions too. I mean, if you go far west enough, you eventually end up east, and vice versa is true. So where does it all really begin?
These are the sort of ideas, that's the stuff that makes every man a king, that makes you more powerful, that makes you a creator. It's when you realize that you have the potential to be one with God. And it's a constant falling away from that, day to day, probably hour to hour. And that's basically what the Bible is. The Bible is stories about the faithful coming to God and then falling away, then coming to God, then falling away. That's an image of your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's when you really understand it, not just hear it, not just know it, but fucking feel it constantly. And that's what monks are sitting at the banks of the Ganges meditating on. Like, it's not an easy thing. But when you can grasp that, that's when you can manifest your own will. And not fucking brag about it, and maybe not even benefit from it yourself as you are now. But to know, like, what needs to be pushed for, what will help other people see the light, realize that they too have power and can be a king. I think technology, honestly, at this point, I think it's going to help that. I think we're at a very violent time. I wouldn't sit here and say, like, technology is a positive thing in our lives, but I think it is the realization of how damaging it can be that can turn it around.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd say like the best thing you do right now is just stop watching the news. And as soon as you stop doing that, go outside, man. Start talking to your neighbor, or whatever. I think you'll quickly find out things are a lot more wholesome than they really want to project it to be. Because I think there are powers that be that are in charge of things, and they're trying to manifest this like really shithole world, and we got to take that away from them.
Yeah, and we were talking last night about how, like, the Fae, the Jinn, when you have these nuanced ideas, the Devas, these really nuanced ideas about quote-unquote demons, you start to realize that they live a lot like us. There are the negative ones, there are the positive ones, and it does seem to me very evident that the people in power are worshiping something. They're worshiping something, and it's fucking obviously not
Absolutely.
positive. They're pulling out the most sick fuck demonic energies and powers they can possibly get into their seething hands of Lucifer. And they're enacting it on us.
Yeah, they want to disarm people, make them helpless, make them completely perverted and degenerate and all that stuff. I mean, you see it every day on like TV and all that.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's certainly different than what it was in like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and what people I think have to do is really figure out what would be good for the whole world and find that common ground there. And only when that happens can manifestations start to occur that will benefit us. I think we're going in that direction. I want to say that there's probably never been a time when more people were mad at the powers that be. Very angry, even if they don't realize it. And there's probably just as many people who are so easily satiated by them. But I don't think that satisfaction ever lasts. Like the people controlling things, they're on a constant fucking process of getting people back to believe in them before they're like, all right, all this shit is fucked. All these people are liars. They're just ruining my life. And I think that's where even all the people who hated Trump and they're like, oh, Biden's president. Thank God we have an honest American. Like, they're going to realize real fast there ain't no fucking honest Americans in control. If you're an honest American, you are not allowed in control, period.
Yeah, I remember reading, you ever heard the Romance of the Three Kingdoms? It's an old Chinese book. And it's not verbatim quote, but it's the fate of everything, like things that are unified to separate and things that are separate to eventually unify again. It's all cyclical.
That starts to make me think that, like, ideas like the Big Bang Theory. Like, I feel like it was occultists who formulated that and then propagated it. Because it is a very occult idea. It's very similar to what we're saying about God being the single source full of infinite potentials where everything possible could ever exist, and then it all emanates from that. And you have images like the mandala, you have the chaos star where you have the center with the arrows pointing out, even stuff like the swastika,
Lotus
the
flower.
Ancient symbol. Yeah. They all show this. Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that, for lack of a better word, sorcerers have been in power of our establishments, whether it's the media, whether it's science, whether it's whatever it is. They're fucking in control.
I think it's always been the case. We've always had like sorcerers. I mean, even like kings of old, they all had their court magician or whatever, like helping them out.
Yes, it was always the sorcerer who was in control of the king, who was his closest advisor. And I would say it still is to this day. When we can see articles going back to we know Reagan. Reagan's wife was like obsessed with astrology. And they would like plan out the things they did based on what their astrologer said. And that's not the first high-ranking official that's ever done that. Many people, they've always done that.
Like Queen Elizabeth from like way back in the Renaissance, she had her own court magician. It was John Dee. He was a real famous, somewhat famous guy now. If you're in the occult circles, you know about him.
Well, he was behind like the Enochian language, talking to angels, all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
He was the basis for the 007 character, I hear. I don't have any information on that, but I have heard that before.
What I've heard is like John Dee was actually kind of responsible for helping us navigate to the new world and all that. He magicked that stuff up and figured out science behind it.
Yeah. I wonder what's going on now, because obviously they would have to keep that shit more under wraps. And I think stuff like Pizzagate scared the fuck out of the people in charge, because they know they're up to weird things. And they're probably looking, at first I bet they're looking at the Pizzagate shit and being like, this is all exaggeration. They got it all wrong.
It's like QAnon or some shit.
Yeah, well, I think that's an attempt to co-opt a very real feeling that these people are worshiping fucking demons and doing weird fucking rituals. I believe they are. I do absolutely believe they're sacrificing people. I think that's going on. I think today... what they do now is they get together in places like Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
The media is not allowed there, so they can talk about this shit freely. And then we know they do mock human sacrifices. And fucking, you're going to tell me these people in fucking the highest positions of power that have ever existed, as far as we know in the entire world, they just stopped doing all of these weird things that have always been done, but they do fake sacrifices, but not the real ones like the Aztecs or anything. They just do the fake ones. That's fucking bullshit. They're doing the real shit too.
Yeah. I think it's based off of the old cult of Baal, where they pass a child through the flames on that statue.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the classic image of the bull-headed god.
No, it's not Baal. It's Moloch. Moloch.
Yes. I think a lot of these things, and especially when you get into conspiracy circles, a lot of this shit gets interchangeable. It's ultimately not that important because I'm not worshiping this goddamn thing. But yeah,
Me neither.
you have the images of like the bull-headed god with its arms out over the fire, and they would place the child into the arms of the whatever it was, the brass bull or whatever, and the child would just roast. I think there is power to be gained from these sort of things. Not any legitimate power, and not power that lasts, but power enough to manifest someone's dark energies into this world. I don't think they've stopped it. And if these fucking people had any goddamn integrity, they'd be manifesting Bigfoot at the Bohemian Grove, and we'd have images of him hanging out with all the presidents. That's what I want.
Probably having gay sex there.
Gay
too,
sex
probably.
with Bigfoot.
Yeah.
As long
So
as they
I heard
prove,
that's
as long as they prove
do
it's
over
real.
there. Yeah, that's all we want. Just a real tangible evidence of Bigfoot.
Yeah, and the sex magic thing is fucking absolutely tied into what they're doing. I think that is probably the best way to. I say the best, but historically, when you look at magical literature, the idea behind, especially when it's a group of people and you all have to achieve consensus among yourselves, you have to get into an ecstatic frenzy and basically disassociate from your material body. That's done through drugs and strenuous activity and sex and these things that get people so goddamn hyped they don't even know what the fuck is going on anymore, to the point where they just fall back in an ecstatic state. I've seen practices of like Kundalini yoga like that, where they're all in a gymnasium and they jump up and down and they scream as loud as they can, and they do that until they're at the brink of passing out. And then, because you're in a room full of like 100 people, and suddenly everybody stops and it's just silence. And I would imagine that sensation is probably fucking orgasmic. And like that's a point when everybody's minds are clear. Everybody has achieved some sort of consensus, depending on what the goal of this sort of thing is. I doubt it's generally that pure, but I think that's always been the case, is that you have to achieve these consensus with people in order to manifest whatever entity or whatever power or whatever will you're going for. You have to go through these strenuous activities. That's the idea of like left-hand path magic too. To like the idea of focusing and meditating on death, on a corpse, or to imagine yourself dying and rotting away to a skeleton. That takes you far enough out of your material world to give you a different perspective on the universe as a whole. And I think that can be used positively or negatively. And that's probably true of entities on every level. You have a lot of these Hindu sources, and they'll specifically say that once you achieve a certain siddhi, like basically a fucking superpower, you can traverse through dimensions. You can go interact with beings on other planes. I really do believe these people are doing it. And like I said, I can't verify how real something is, how real it could be to me if it's tailor-made for them. But I don't think that necessarily matters when you can still pull out something amazing from it and apply it to your own world. But if these other realms do exist and these other beings are there right now without us observing them, but going about their day-to-day lives as their own observers, it would only make sense that there are the ones who are able to do the same thing and come to our realm, that have that sort of, I want to say spiritual achievement. I don't think this is necessarily spiritual. That's one thing you hear a lot from yogis and monks and that sort of thing, is that the siddhis aren't spiritual. Their only value spiritually is to make other people see the ultimate reality that is just God. So
yeah, I think that goes back to the whole pendulum swing thing. I mean, if you can manifest one way, it should be able to manifest the other way too.
Yes. And then these sorts of abilities would simply be tools at the disposal of different beings with different goals, some of which are not what we want at all.
No, they're what some people want, I think, just not the general populace.
Dude, fucking, it sounds ridiculous. The house I've got, what sold me on buying this thing, and it's a great house, don't get me wrong. What
Mm-hmm.
sold me on this is I can look right out at my backyard to the tree line and be like, yeah, Bigfoot's going to walk out of there one day.
Keep believing it, man. It'll happen eventually.
Dude, I'm meditating on it every day. First thing I think when I look out that window, where the fuck is he? Where the fuck are you fucking big bastard? You fucking big galoot.
What if you
Show
just wake
thyself.
up one morning? You wake up one morning, look out your window. It's just like Bigfoot in the tree line. He's just like bent over, mooning you.
No, what would happen is that I would wake up and I'd be like, I'm blind. I wouldn't be able to see anything. I'd realize that Bigfoot's just got his giant hairy balls over my eyes. That's probably it.
He just snuck into your house.
He's a very stealthy individual, especially when you move through portals.
Yeah.
I will. You can't stop that.
Oh, yeah.
He's coming. He's gonna rape you.
No wall, no door is gonna save you from Bigfoot. If he's got the hots for you, he's coming to get you. You just better hope it's a she-foot, not a he-foot.
I think that's a great way to put a bookmark on this conversation. Because I still want some other people's takes on this. I think we can probably formulate a little more on this. But for now, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Everyone,
we gotta get some more minds on this.
That's true. We're gonna get the fucking round table. What the fuck does Steve Istal say? The intellectual round table.
Bigfoot Camelot.
Yeah. All right, so I want everyone to go to teespring.com/store/Yakov-alive and buy t-shirts, patreon.com/Yakov-alive and fucking pay me for the love of God. I'm on the Fediverse at Yakov at kiwifarms.cc. Mattie, do you have anything you'd like to shill?
Oh, I don't know. What do you want to see, man? I got a lot of stuff.
You got any links you got? I don't know. You got anything that's
I
public?
don't have any links. I'm a nobody, man.
All right, that's
I'm
the
a
best.
Ghost.
That's the best way to
I'm
be.
basically Bigfoot. I'm the internet Bigfoot. I'm here and then I'm gone.
You do have a gorgeous mane. Something tells me you had to shave it all off the rest of your body. Is that what happened?
No, it just kind of grows.
It's not all over the body though. You're a hairless Bigfoot.
Yeah, I'm a hairless Bigfoot.
All right. With that, we're gonna get the fuck out of here. Thanks for watching, everybody.